Paul Heyman just committed the ultimate act of betrayal, and if you don't understand why what happened last night on Monday Night Raw is going to completely change everything you thought you knew about WWE's power structure, about loyalty, about the bloodline, and about where this company is heading in 2026, then you need to stop whatever you're doing right now and pay attention, because I'm about to explain why Paul Heyman taking a steel chair and smashing it across Braun Breaker's skull to save CM Punk from a vicious 2-on-1 assault isn't just shocking television, it's a declaration of war that's going to have consequences nobody can predict. And before you tell me I'm overreacting, before you say this is just wrestling and nothing matters, I need you to understand that Paul Heyman doesn't pick up steel chairs and hit people unless something monumental is shifting behind the scenes, unless alliances that seemed permanent are crumbling, unless the wise man himself has decided that his future lies somewhere other than Roman Reigns' side, and that terrifying possibility should have every single person watching WWE absolutely losing their minds right now. Let me paint you a picture of exactly what went down last night, because the way WWE presented this on television doesn't do justice to how brutal and how shocking this moment actually was when you break down every single element. CM Punk was in that ring cutting a promo, talking about his journey back to WWE, talking about the obstacles he's faced, talking about the people who don't want to see him succeed, and you could feel the tension building because Punk wasn't holding back. He was speaking truths that made WWE management uncomfortable, truths about favoritism and politics and how this company operates when the cameras aren't rolling. The crowd was hanging on every word because this is what CM Punk does better than anyone alive. He blurs the line between reality and storyline so effectively that you never quite know where one ends and the other begins. That's when Bronson Reed's music hit and that monstrous 300-pound-plus wrecking machine came stomping down that ramp with murder written all over his face. Reed slid into the ring and didn't even wait for Punk to finish speaking. He just charged forward and leveled Punk with a clothesline so vicious that Punk flipped completely in the air before crashing to the mat. The crowd gasped because this wasn't a worked clothesline, this was Reed using his full power to nearly decapitate CM Punk, and before Punk could even process what had hit him, before he could get to his feet or mount any kind of defense, Braun Breaker's music hit and suddenly CM Punk's nightmare got exponentially worse. Breaker sprinted down that ramp like a man possessed, slid into the ring, and these two absolute monsters, these two specimens of physical perfection who represent everything WWE wants their future stars to be, immediately began coordinating their assault on CM Punk with a level of viciousness that crossed the line from wrestling into legitimate violence. Reed grabbed Punk and held him up while Breaker delivered a series of brutal knee strikes to Punk's midsection, each impact making a sickening sound that echoed through the arena. Punk's body was limp, he was already done, he was already defenseless, but Reed and Breaker weren't satisfied with just beating him. They wanted to destroy him, they wanted to end his career, they wanted to make such a brutal example out of CM Punk that everyone watching would understand that the old guard was finished and the new generation was taking over by force. Breaker stepped back and Reed lifted Punk up into a military press position, holding him high above his head to showcase his strength before dropping Punk face first onto the mat in a move that looked like it shattered Punk's jaw. The referee was trying to restore order, officials were rushing down the ramp, but Reed and Breaker shoved them all away like they were children, like nothing, and nobody was going to stop them from completing their mission of absolute destruction. Breaker picked up Punk's limp body and positioned him for a spear, the devastating signature move that has ended so many careers, and he charged across the ring and drove his shoulder into Punk's ribs with such force that Punk folded in half like a lawn chair. Punk was coughing, struggling to breathe, possibly suffering from broken ribs or internal injuries, and the crowd was in shock because this had gone way beyond a standard wrestling beatdown. This was two men legitimately trying to put CM Punk in the hospital, trying to injure him so severely that he would never be able to compete again. Reed climbed to the top rope, all 300+ pounds of him balancing on that turnbuckle, preparing to deliver his tsunami splash that has injured so many wrestlers over the past year, and CM Punk was just lying there motionless, unable to defend himself, unable to escape, completely at the mercy of two men who had no mercy to give. That's when everything changed. That's when the impossible happened. That's when Paul Heyman's music hit and the wise man himself walked out onto that stage with something in his hand that made everyone watching lose their absolute minds. A steel chair. Paul Heyman, who hasn't taken a physical bump in years, who operates through manipulation and words rather than violence, who built his entire career on being the smartest person in the room who never has to get his hands dirty, was standing on that stage holding a steel chair and staring down at the ring where CM Punk was about to be crushed by Bronson Reed's tsunami splash. Heyman didn't say a word. He didn't cut a promo. He didn't try to talk Reed and Breaker out of what they were doing. He just walked down that ramp with purpose, with determination, with the steel chair gripped tightly in his hands. Reed was still on the top rope, still preparing to launch himself at CM Punk's broken body, when Heyman slid into the ring and did something that nobody watching could have predicted in a million years. He swung that steel chair with everything he had and cracked Braun Breaker right across the skull. The sound of steel meeting skull echoed through the entire arena and Breaker dropped like he'd been shot, completely unconscious before he hit the mat, blood immediately starting to pour from a gash on his forehead. The crowd erupted in shock and confusion and excitement because Paul Heyman just committed an act of violence that seemed completely out of character, that violated everything we thought we knew about how Heyman operates, that suggested something fundamental had shifted in the wise man's priorities and allegiances. Bronson Reed immediately abandoned his position on the top rope and charged at Heyman, this massive monster of a man bearing down on someone who weighs maybe 170 pounds soaking wet, and you could see the fear flash across Heyman's face for just a second before he gripped that steel chair tighter and swung it again, this time catching Reed right in the knee and causing the big man to stumble. Heyman didn't stop. He swung the chair a third time, hitting Reed across the back, then a fourth time, then a fifth time, just unloading years of pent-up frustration and aggression and who knows what else into every single shot. Reed eventually rolled out of the ring to escape the assault, grabbing the unconscious Braun Breaker and dragging him up the ramp while Heyman stood in the center of that ring, breathing hard, still clutching the steel chair, standing protectively over CM Punk's broken body. The imagery was powerful enough to carry this story for months. Paul Heyman, the wise man, Roman Reigns' special counsel, the architect of the Bloodline's dominance, standing in a WWE ring with a weapon in his hands, having just attacked two of WWE's most promising young stars to save CM Punk. But the questions that image raises are even more powerful than the image itself. Why would Heyman do this? What does he gain from saving CM Punk? And most importantly, does this mean Paul Heyman has betrayed the Bloodline, betrayed Roman Reigns, betrayed everything he's built over the past 4 years to align himself with a man who represents everything WWE management has been trying to suppress? Let's talk about what this could mean, because if Paul Heyman has genuinely decided to leave Roman Reigns' side and team up with CM Punk, the implications are staggering and the wrestling world as we know it is about to be turned completely upside down. Heyman has been the foundation of the Bloodline's success, the mastermind behind Roman Reigns' historic championship reign, the voice that legitimized everything the Tribal Chief did. Without Heyman, does the Bloodline maintain its dominance? Without Heyman's counsel, does Roman Reigns remain the most protected and most feared wrestler in WWE? And if Heyman is willing to abandon all of that to protect and presumably manage CM Punk, what does that tell us about how Heyman views the future of this industry and where the real power is shifting? There's a version of this story where Heyman saw Reed and Breaker brutalizing CM Punk and made a spontaneous decision based on respect for a fellow legend, based on memories of their successful partnership years ago, based on a moral compass that wouldn't allow him to watch someone get destroyed 2-on-1 regardless of politics or alliances. But anyone who knows Paul Heyman knows that's not how he operates. Heyman doesn't make emotional decisions in the moment. Everything Heyman does is calculated, is strategic, is designed to advance his position and the position of the people he's aligned with. So if we accept that Heyman's decision to save Punk was strategic rather than emotional, we have to ask what his strategy is, what his endgame could possibly be that makes betraying the Bloodline worth the risk. One possibility that should terrify Roman Reigns is that Paul Heyman has decided the Bloodline has run its course, that the story has played out as far as it can go, and that his future success depends on attaching himself to someone new before the Bloodline's inevitable collapse. Heyman is nothing if not a survivor who always manages to land on his feet no matter how many times the wrestling landscape shifts beneath him. He survived ECW going bankrupt. He survived his first WWE run ending badly. He survived being Paul Bearer's replacement manager for various monsters. He reinvented himself with Brock Lesnar and then again with Roman Reigns. Maybe he's looked at the situation objectively and determined that CM Punk, despite all his baggage and injury history and backstage drama, represents a better investment for the next phase of Heyman's career than continuing to tie himself to Roman Reigns, who might be approaching the end of his peak years. Another possibility, and this one is even more fascinating, is that Heyman isn't betraying Roman Reigns at all but is actually operating with the Tribal Chief's blessing to expand the Bloodline's influence onto Monday Night Raw by bringing CM Punk into the fold. Think about how powerful that would be. The Bloodline has dominated SmackDown for years. If they could establish a presence on Raw through Heyman managing Punk, they would essentially control both brands. They would be the undisputed power structure in all of WWE. Roman Reigns and CM Punk teaming up under Paul Heyman's guidance would be the most dominant faction in wrestling history, combining Roman's size and legitimacy with Punk's mic skills and fanbase. But this theory requires us to believe that Roman Reigns would be willing to share power with CM Punk, and everything we know about the Tribal Chief suggests he doesn't share power with anyone. He demands absolute loyalty and absolute submission from everyone in his orbit. Here's another angle that nobody is talking about but needs to be considered. What if Paul Heyman saving CM Punk last night wasn't about Punk at all but was actually about Heyman sending a message to WWE management about how they're handling their roster and their booking decisions? Heyman has been in this business for 40 years, he understands what draws money and what creates stars, and he's watched WWE systematically misuse CM Punk since his return, booking him poorly, keeping him away from main events, allowing younger wrestlers like Reed and Breaker to destroy his credibility through segments exactly like what we saw last night. Maybe Heyman is sick of watching WWE waste talent and opportunity. Maybe he's decided that someone needs to stand up and protect the wrestlers who actually matter from management's short-sighted decisions, and maybe using that steel chair on Reed and Breaker was Heyman's way of saying enough is enough. The crowd's reaction to Heyman's actions last night tells you everything you need to know about how fans are processing this shocking development. When Heyman's music first hit, there was confusion because nobody expected him to be involved in this angle. When he walked out with that steel chair, the confusion turned to anticipation because everyone sensed something big was about to happen. When he actually swung the chair and knocked out Braun Breaker, the arena exploded because Paul Heyman taking physical action is so rare and so significant that it automatically becomes a historic moment. And when Heyman stood over CM Punk's body protecting him from further assault, the crowd's reaction was pure catharsis, pure satisfaction that someone finally stepped up to help Punk against the forces trying to destroy him. But not everyone is celebrating Heyman's decision. Social media has been absolutely divided since last night's show ended, with one faction praising Heyman for doing the right thing and saving a legend from serious injury, and another faction accusing Heyman of betraying the bloodline, betraying Roman Reigns, and making a decision that will ultimately backfire spectacularly. The people defending Heyman point to CM Punk's value as a performer and a draw, arguing that allowing Reed and Breaker to end his career would have been a tragic waste. The people criticizing Heyman point to his years of loyalty to Roman Reigns and argue that no matter what justification he might have, abandoning the tribal chief to align with CM Punk is an act of treachery that cannot be forgiven or forgotten. What happens next is going to determine the direction of WWE for months if not years to come. Does Roman Reigns appear on Raw next week to confront Paul Heyman about his actions? Does Heyman try to explain himself and justify what he did? Does CM Punk, once he's recovered from the brutal assault, accept Heyman's help in reformation of their old partnership? Do Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker get reprimanded for their actions or do they get rewarded for trying to take out CM Punk? Does WWE management step in and impose some kind of order on this chaos or do they let it play out organically? Every single one of these questions represents a different direction this story could go, and the choices WWE makes will reveal a lot about what they value and who they see as their future. Let me tell you what I think is really happening here because I've been watching this business long enough to recognize patterns and to understand when something significant is shifting beneath the surface. I think Paul Heyman has been uncomfortable with how WWE has been treating CM Punk for months. I think Heyman has been watching from his position within the bloodline as management systematically undermined Punk, and I think Heyman recognized that what's being done to Punk could just as easily be done to Roman Reigns or anyone else who gets on the wrong side of corporate politics. So by saving Punk, by using that steel chair on Reed and Breaker who were clearly operating with someone's blessing if not direct orders to injure Punk, Heyman is actually protecting his own interests and his own position by standing up to WWE's power structure before that power structure decides to target him or the bloodline next. The steel chair is significant beyond just being a weapon. In wrestling psychology, a steel chair represents crossing a line, represents being willing to do whatever it takes to achieve your goals regardless of the consequences. Paul Heyman picking up that steel chair and using it to crack Braun Breaker's skull is Heyman saying that he's willing to cross lines, willing to make enemies, willing to sacrifice his comfortable position within WWE's hierarchy if that's what it takes to do what he believes is right. That's a version of Paul Heyman we haven't seen in years, maybe ever, and it makes him more dangerous and more unpredictable than he's been at any point in his legendary career. CM Punk was moments away from career-ending injuries when Paul Heyman intervened. That's not hyperbole, that's fact. Bronson Reed's tsunami splash has legitimately injured multiple wrestlers over the past year, and Punk's body after years of wear and tear and previous injuries would not have survived that impact on top of everything else Reed and Breaker had already done to him. Heyman didn't just save Punk from a beatdown, he potentially saved Punk's career and possibly his life, and that creates a debt that will define their relationship moving forward. Whether Punk wants to acknowledge it or not, whether Punk is comfortable with it or not, he now owes Paul Heyman everything, and Heyman will absolutely collect on that debt when the time is right. This could be the beginning of the most powerful alliance in modern wrestling, or it could be the first step toward spectacular failure and chaos for everyone involved. Paul Heyman and CM Punk together have the potential to be absolutely unstoppable, combining Heyman's strategic genius with Punk's in-ring ability and microphone skills. But both men have massive egos, both men have histories of burned bridges and scorched earth, both men are notoriously difficult to work with when things don't go their way. Can they coexist? Can they trust each other? Can they build something meaningful together, or will their past issues and personality conflicts doom this partnership before it really begins? What we witnessed last night on Monday Night Raw was Paul Heyman making a choice that will define the rest of his career and possibly the rest of CM Punk's career. A steel chair shot that echoed through the arena and through the wrestling world. A moment of violence from a man who built his reputation on avoiding violence. A betrayal of the bloodline or a calculated strategic decision that only makes sense to the wise man himself. And most importantly, a save that pulled CM Punk back from the brink of destruction and gave him a fighting chance to survive in an environment that seems determined to chew him up and spit him out. Drop your comments right now and tell me whether Paul Heyman made the right decision saving CM Punk. Tell me whether you think this is a betrayal of Roman Reigns and the bloodline or whether there's more to this story than we're seeing. Tell me if you believe Heyman and Punk can actually work together successfully or if this partnership is doomed to fail. Hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started and you're going to want to follow every development as it unfolds. Share this video with everyone who watched Raw last night because this is the conversation the wrestling world needs to be having right now. Paul Heyman swung a steel chair and changed everything, and if you're not paying attention, if you're not following this story closely, you're going to miss the most important angle WWE has done in years.